What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Scott Proctor alongside my guy Matt Morris per usual, and we're back with another episode of Simple Question. But this time we'll have more than one because we got a special guest joining us today for the first time. Combat columnist at Yahoo Sports, been covering combat sports since the 1970s. Kevin Iole. Kevin, thanks for joining us, my man. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Busy time in combat sports, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
There is a fun weekend ahead of us, kind of headlined by a big boxing tilt between Canelo Alvarez and Dmitry Bivol. Kevin, I want to start here. Obviously, Canelo's only loss in his professional career came almost a decade ago at the hands of Floyd Mayweather. What do you think Canelo has kind of learned from that and since that time? And how do you think he's kind of evolved as a boxer since?
I mean, you look at what he's done since. He's gone 15-0-1. He's gone on this incredible run, beaten almost all 15 that he fought were champions. I think there was one or two in there that didn't have titles, but he learned how to win against Mayweather. He had all the physical tools that you needed. Mayweather just knew a lot of tricks of the trade that Canelo didn't know. And, what Canelo learned, hey, I have to take it to another level. As hard as he was working, he learned he had to take it to another level. And he learned all those things. And, he's made himself into the best fighter in the world. And what he's doing, you can't underestimate how amazing it is. This is a guy that I really believe could be fighting at 154. It'll be tough for him to make the weight, but I believe he can make it. He's fighting at 175 against guys. He's giving away height, reach, strength, all these different things. And he's still winning. I mean, give the guy a lot of credit. And I mean, whatever you think of him, give him a lot of credit.
No doubt.
Yeah, you definitely have to. And I mean, this is obviously, it feels like it's Canelo's fight to lose, but Bivol is impressive, and he's had a nice run as of late, and he's got some size on him, as you mentioned, with against Canelo. Is there a way and a route that Bivol wins this? How do you see that happening, and what would he have to do to really either to convince the judges or be able to land something on Canelo where it takes over?
I think Bivol's style really helps him in this situation because he's conservative by nature, right? Mm-hmm. So I think if he gets into a shootout with Canelo, that is the worst thing for him. He doesn't want to get in there where, he's getting countered a lot and everything, but he fights kind of conservatively within himself. He uses his jab a lot. He throws punches, even though he looks conventional in his original sense, look at how he throws his punches, not direct, not straight, they come from different angles. And I think, he's not going to throw unless he's reasonably certain he can land. And so that's the kind of guy that could give Canelo trouble, right? He's good defensively, he's athletic, he's got quick hands and he's bigger. So I think those are things, I do believe Canelo breaks him down, but I think Bivol, if he keeps that jab going, he's doesn't stay in one place, stays off the ropes, stays out of the corners, I think he's got a shot.
Kevin, assuming Canelo takes care of business this weekend, and obviously moves on from this point, he at least has probably two more big time fights the rest of the year here this way. Again, assuming he takes care of business this weekend, kind of the rest of the year in the near future, where do you kind of envision Canelo being kind of in the hierarchy of all-time boxers? Where do you think we'll kind of view him, maybe say 20, 30, 40 years from now? Again, assuming, he continues to take care of business like many think he will.
I think if he does what is kind of ahead of him, if he beats Bivol, then he has Gennady Golovkin. If he beats Golovkin again, and then potentially the Joe Smith Beterbiev winner, I think you're looking at this guy as a top 20 fighter of all time. I mean, that is high praise, because you think of how many great fighters there have been over the years. And, you just take top 20 fighters in one decade and you name whatever decade you want, and there's 20 really good fighters, starting now going backwards. And if Canelo is one of the top 20 of all time, that is a great accomplishment. And if he does, what I think is almost the unthinkable and goes and wins a heavyweight title by fighting Alexander Usyk, you're talking about one of the best to ever do it.
And Kevin, I want to stay there too, just in terms of how likely you think that is, because I think Canelo has been on the record saying that he'll fight anybody. You said it. He's been from 156 up to 175 now. How likely do you think that that's something that Canelo one day might really want to take down, going up to the heavyweight level?
I think it's unlikely because, like think about this. When Roy Jones fought John Ruiz, he went up from 175. He weighed in at what I think he was 203, won the title, and then he tried to go back down, and he had trouble with guys going down in weight, especially losing that much, 25 pounds. That's really hard. Usyk weighed, I think it was 222 for his fight with Joshua. Going to be hard for him to go to 201, right? I think that's going to be logistically difficult. And also the other thing that's out there is if Tyson Fury doesn't retire and he beats Joshua the second time, that becomes a big factor. Like, does he go for the undisputed heavyweight title? Because what is in it for Usyk beating Canelo, right? I mean, if you're Alexander Usyk, you're 6'3", you're a heavyweight. What's in it for beating a 5'8", light heavyweight or super middleweight, right? I mean, what is in it for him, other than a big paycheck, So I think, and the other thing we have to say is Usyk has to beat Joshua, and that's no guarantee. And then Canelo, to get to Usyk, has to beat Bivol, Golovkin, and the Smith better be a winner. So there's a lot that has to happen. That's why I say it's unlikely.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but I mean, it's still going to be exciting this weekend, and obviously UFC 274 is also going on, so I know there's going to be a lot of betting going on for those fights. Is there anything as far as who you think is going to win, and some things that you could give to our viewers that are bettors, some advice heading into this weekend?
Well, yeah, I think, there's a lot of really good, first of all, just a lot of really good fights this weekend. It's interesting. I could pick, and I did my betting column the other day. One of the fights I didn't pick was Donald Cerrone and Joe Lozon, because I wrote it before I saw the press conference. And listening to Donald Cerrone, I think he's primed. Now let's look at that fight. Cerrone's lost 5 in a row. Basically, he's 0-5 with a no contest. Hasn't looked like himself. He's gotten knocked out in 4 of those. But he's fighting a guy in Joe Lozon that hasn't fought in 3 years. So Lozon, I think it's 32 months that he's been away. I like Cerrone in that fight. I think, Cerrone talked about his commitment to training, commitment to get, he parked his RV at the UFC Performance Institute, stayed there for 2 months and got himself into shape and did all the things. I think he is primed for a big performance. So I like Cerrone in that fight. So that would be one that I like. Then I think in the Gaethje Oliveira fight, the main event, which is going to be a sick, crazy fight, I think you bet under the distance, right? Because can anybody see the judges scoring that fight? Charles Oliveira's had 32 wins, 29 of them were finishes. Gaethje is a finish machine. So you got to think something's going to happen in that fight. So those would be 2 that I would say that I like, but a lot of good opportunities on this show.
No doubt about it. I want to stay a little bit with UFC 274 if we can. Michael Chandler, Tony Ferguson. You recently wrote a column on Yahoo Sports. Go check that out if you haven't already read it, everybody. But you talked about how Chandler and Ferguson are polar opposites. Talk a little bit about that, how so, and how you envision kind of those differences in styles kind of playing out.
Well, the one way they're similar, and that's what I wrote in my lead, is that they both just go crazy and they bring it, and they really, fight this frenetic, high pace, high energy, high contact style. They're different in their approach to the sport. Michael Chandler, some people may call him a kiss ass, right? He's always praising the UFC. He's thanking the UFC and all that. And, he's one of those guys that, and, he fought most of his career in Bellator, and, he had a good run. I think at the end of his time in Bellator, you could look at it and say Michael Chandler was the face of that organization. You might say Ben Askren, you might say Pitbull, but certainly Chandler was no worse than third in his time in Bellator, and you can make a good argument that he was first. But what he didn't get by being in Bellator is he didn't get all the outside interest. He's getting a ton of sponsorship opportunities now. He's getting a ton of media attention now, and so he recognizes where that's coming from, and he's very grateful on it. Tony Ferguson, is just like, he says whatever comes into his mind, and he's kind of the guy that, he likes to thumb his nose at the man, and he called Dana White acting like a drug dealer, the other day, and so can you ever imagine Michael Chandler saying Dana White reminds me of a drug dealer? Like it just would never happen. And so I think, and their approach to the fights, and I don't think Tony really believes a lot of what he said, but I think it gets him kind of, it gets him in the right mindset to that way. It's like him against the world, and he's got to have something to rail against. And I think that's sort of what he does before the fights to get himself ramped up.
And he definitely, again, in that column, you talked about it last year at a pre-fight, meeting before UFC 262. Ferguson told Chandler, talking about that kiss butt stuff. You got expletive, you got stuff handed to you. You got the Dana White privilege.
Great line.
Just hilarious stuff. No doubt. I can't wait to see how that kind of unfolds. Probably last question we got for you, Kevin, before we let you get up out of here. Not even really a question. I know you're a Pittsburgh sports fan, Penguins included. How you feeling about your Penguins right now? Series tied 1-1 with the Rangers at this point.
I'll tell you what, I love hockey. I'm a diehard Penguins fan, grew up in Pittsburgh, been a Penguins fan all my life. Of course, I've adopted the Golden Knights since I've lived in Vegas so long. Mm-hmm. But you know what? I think it looks good for the Penguins. They've outplayed the Rangers in the first two games. They had way more shots, way more chances. I like what they did. The thing that concerns me, or two things, Shesterkin is such an unbelievable goalie. And we started the series with our backup goalie. Now we're on our third string goalie. Jari, our starting goalie, has a broken foot. You don't know what's going to happen health-wise with goaltenders is a big thing. But if the Penguins get the goaltending in the series, I think the Penguins can win this.
No doubt about it. It's awesome stuff, Kevin. Thanks so much for joining us. We got a fun, exciting weekend of combat sports ahead of us. But for Scott Proctor, Matt Morris, our guy, Kevin Iole, we'll catch you on the next episode of Simple Questions.